Hi there, thank you for joining us and welcome to the next session for Global Partnership Day. This session is entitled Mobile First Partnerships, How to Create Appealing Partnerships. And I can't think of three better panelists to join us to walk through such an interesting conversation for our channel and our industry more broadly. I want to introduce all three of them. First up, we have Dean Smith. So Dean is a digital marketing professional with over 10 years experience devising and executing performance marketing strategy. He now manages strategic alliances for Branch, helping the region's leading brands drive mobile growth via world-leading deep linking and attribution technology. Also joining us on the panel is Angus Sladden. Angus brings over 10 years of experience working in the partnership channel and media industry to his role as manager for Klarna Media. Angus is responsible for establishing and expanding the partner-first focus of Klarna's consumer shopping app and implementing growth-driving strategies to help scale Klarna in APAC. And also joining us is Jessica Rayner. Jess has worked in digital marketing for the past 6 years, with 5 of those specifically in the affiliate marketing channel. She's worked both agency and publisher side with a passion for launching and growing successful partnerships. She is currently managing the growth and optimization of the very innovative Raise Rewards program in the micro investing app Raise Invest. Jess, it's you who I want to start with. You guys have had a phenomenal 15 months since the pandemic started. You now have around 420,000 users and something like 700 million in funds under management. You have access to some really interesting data in the platform on users. Can you share with us 1 or 2 interesting data points you've seen over the past 15 months?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. As an app-focused company, this is a really exciting panel to be a part of. Our success as a brand has relied heavily on allowing people to, whip out their phone and invest for as little as $5 from their fingertips, which in the past was unheard of. So 2020, our signups grew by 20%. As of April this year, already another 10%, which is great because people are showing more of an interest in investing in their finances overall. So we've always seen the importance of mobile with about 80% mobile and the other 20% on desktop. And yeah, 2020 was an interesting year for all of us. It definitely paved a new direction in the way people shop, particularly online. So just as an example, eBay, one of the biggest online sites who also have a great app, we saw their transaction count double from 2019 to 2020, and the actual sale amount almost tripled. So not only are people purchasing more frequently, but their basket size is bigger. PayPal, Afterpay sales, both doubling from 2019 to 2020. So yeah, as you can see, customers are becoming more tech savvy, and it's great to see that some of our partnered brands have shifted a focus to push their apps, and I do predict, more will follow in their footsteps soon enough.
Yeah, amazing. Angus, Buy Now, Pay Later was just mentioned then. Klarna launched in March 2020 in Australia, and a couple of weeks later, the world changed. Can you talk us through maybe how you guys, responded and pivoted the business and how that's benefited you since that pandemic event?
Yeah, definitely. Firstly, thanks for having me. Jess made a few really good points here, and it's a similar thing to us. As you mentioned, we launched in Feb last year, and then a month later, the world just changed and just ended. Basically, everything got switched off. So our initial strategy for marketing and a launch perspective was all around above-the-line media, TV, radio, print. Obviously, you're not going to be driving down the freeway and looking at a Klarna billboard if you're stuck in your lounge room or in your study. So we started to take a step back, scale back on anything that was planned, and really shifted to pure online. So from a media and awareness perspective, even if it was, have you heard of Klarna or download the app now, digital was definitely the main focus for us. And then trying to target people from an under 35 perspective, because that's who we thought the target audience were, and then really just testing and learning. So we like to start small and learn fast here at Klarna. Mentioning the demographics as well, 18 to 30-year-old females were the early adopters for sure, but over the last 16 to 18 months, our core audience and a lot of other BNPLs as well is 30 to 45-year-olds. So that's the higher segment. And a lot of these people are actually using it to manage their cash flow. So our demographics have obviously changed a fair bit. So it's about, iterating the brand and the app to suit the new audiences, listening to consumers and what they want from a demand, and then changing accordingly. So happy to say over the past 16 months, we've now got over 890,000 users. We launched our loyalty program Vibe. We're working really closely with the CBA team from that partnership. And we've also launched our Flybuys partnership. So a fair bit's actually happened since then.
You've been busy. It's good to hear. Dean, I think, a lot of people who are dialing into this kind of webinar on mobile apps, want to start from the start. So it'd be good to sort of paint the picture. I mean, Jess has just mentioned that her business is 80% mobile, but that's not everyone's journey. Can you kind of talk us through like where we're at in terms of the landscape for mobile apps in Australia at the moment?
Yeah, definitely. So firstly, thanks for having me, Will. It's a great panel to be on, and happy to speak on this today. So with that in mind, the landscape in Australia, what we see today, although Australia is catching up, it's still very much a web-heavy audience, web-heavy market, I guess. So what we see is that a lot of the brands in Australia, especially the traditional brands, still have very large web audiences. And furthermore to that, we're seeing that, there is still a prevalence around desktop as the preferred device, although just marginally, with approximately about 52% of all web users still activating on desktop as opposed to mobile. However, I think, what Angus was just saying, COVID really shook things up, and especially in terms of digital transformation. So what we've seen over the past 12 to 18 months is a lot of change and a lot of rapidization in terms of digital strategy and digital transformation, and mobile, and specifically app, is at the center of this. So if we look at the Australian marketplace, maybe 5-6 years ago, there was a big rush by a lot of traditional brands to go out and go, okay, we need an app, we have to have an app, but they didn't really think of what's the value or what is the point of this app. They just wanted to have an app. However, with all the changes that have come about as a result of COVID and this rapid digital transformation, we're seeing that brands are really starting to rethink around the value their app adds to their consumers or their customers. So they're not just need to have an app, they're actually understanding what does that app do and what value does that bring. So there is definitely a big shift away from web to app in Australia. However, we're still a bit behind maybe mobile first markets across the region like North Asia and Southeast Asia.
Yeah, interesting. I think, Jess, you guys are leaders in this space, and it's given that Australia is such a web-heavy market still, in your opinion, then, what is the motivation for brands to evolve an app strategy, and what comes first? Is it the customer experience? Do you build it and they come, or vice versa? Or are we following the consumer lead here?
Yeah, I think I completely understand that customers are probably always going to use both, but thinking about even like your own behavior when it comes to digital use, like how often are you logging into internet banking on a computer versus, checking your banking app. And the main reason here is convenience. So I think 100% lead the way. Definitely still listen to your customers, but a quote I like from Henry Ford, and I hope I get this right, but if he had asked people what they wanted, they would have said fast horses. So I think sometimes it's important to give customers what they want before they even realize it. So from a brand's perspective, I think one of the key advantages to an app is the personal communication straight to the consumer's phone. So speaking personally here, but 9 times out of 10, if a notification comes through on my phone, I look at it almost instantly. Whereas, email and other channels, they're great as well, but there can be a bit of a lag or missed altogether sometimes. So I think, by being able to customize the messaging and get in front of different customers quite quickly is definitely advantageous to brands at this time.
Angus, is that your experience with Klarna? Obviously, you've got wish lists and content creation in the app, etc. Is that sort of how you've approached the customer experience from the app perspective?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just nailed that to start with. It's all about staying relevant. If you're not doing what you deem your main competitors are doing, like catch up to them and be more relevant. So from like a motivation perspective, at least from us over the last 18 months, everyone's going to say it today with COVID, annoyingly, but with more and more people working at home, more and more businesses are having a relaxed work environment and work from home policies. I think, even Dean mentioned it before, businesses had spent so much time building out apps and mobile environments because it was the way forward. And then suddenly it's kind of jolted. People are now back at home, back on the desktop. So I'd say part of the motivation is still there, as users always have a mobile on them, like Jess mentioned. I might text her right now and see if she looks down. Then with tech around, geolocation and targeting and push notifications, you'd be silly not to keep up to date with it all. I think a bit of a tricky question because some businesses need to do both, as users need more, but also expect more. So just kind of staying relevant is probably the key thing from our end, and then educating your users on what's available right now and what's coming up to kind of stay ahead of the curve.
Yeah, Dean, I think, kind of it's pretty obvious what Angus and Jess are saying there in terms of the value of an app user. And I think it's been commented before by industry experts that, in fact, iOS users globally are probably the most valuable user group, that you can get, into because of the higher cost of the device and the way that they interact with their phones. You guys have access to such interesting data in terms of your platform, but can you sort of talk us through potentially why an app user is so valuable and what that opportunity looks like for brands?
Yeah, definitely. So I think first and foremost, what Jess and Angus were both saying is that, mobile is now the #1 device to reach consumers. It overtook TV in terms of like screen time, and that was back in 2019, and we're now 2 years on from that. So with that in mind, apps are becoming even more important, and they touched on this as well, is because this is where the majority of us, consumers, users, brands, customers, this is where we're spending our time doing things. So, for example, what we've seen over the past 4 years, from 2017 to now, is that time spent by users and apps continues to increase, while the time that users spend on mobile web continually decreases. So we're on our phones more and more and more, and we're actually in apps more and more and more. So for example, the average user these days spends, just over 3 hours a day in apps, compared to say only 25 minutes in web browsers. So what this means is that, often brands' most valuable and most loyal users are their app users. So these are the most valuable users that brands need to engage with. Jess mentioned if she gets a push, she's probably going to sort of, look down and engage with it because it's personalized. And what you're able to do with these strategies or with your app users is, sort of drive higher engagement and better performance towards these loyal users. So, you can drive things like better LTV, high average orders. We know that 66% of all mobile transactions happen in native apps. Mobile apps drive approximately 3 times more sales than they do to mobile web. And so with all of that in mind, what's important to note is that with ANZ being a web-heavy audience, brands need to understand the true value of their own app users and what opportunities this presents to their business.
Yeah, great. There's some big numbers, obviously, with the deeper user engagement you can have with an end user, and I think that kind of taps into every marketer's sort of focus, Angus, at the moment, and always would be the customer experience and the user journey. How do you think apps more broadly have influenced those consumer habits and behaviour?
It's interesting. Everyone's kind of touched on it today, but testing and learning and changing. So if we look at CRO or like conversion rate optimization, it's about making it as easy for a consumer to purchase as possible. So it doesn't matter if the final outcome is buying a piece of clothing, if it's downloading a brochure for a car, or you're doing a bit of research and leaving some details. So from our perspective, as we're app heavy, it's a lower percentage of our users are on the desktop. Yes, we do have a desktop version, but we like to focus on showing content to consumers that is top of funnel, but also bottom of funnel, because for us being premium content, with apps, and especially our app, there's less visible real estate than a desktop. So as Dean was saying, it's almost a 50-50 in Australia for desktop versus mobile usage, whereas if you look at Indonesia, it's 80-20. So we are a little bit behind, but it's making what you've got relevant to the user. So what they need, but also what they want to see. So from a shopping habits perspective, we think it's still about time of day and what content you're showing them. So everyone's going to touch on it. People used to get on the bus and go to work and come home, and they've got a lunch break as well. That used to be the ideal time to keep someone. So for us, we're segmenting the demographics. We're changing to meet youth basically, and then the growing youth. So as I mentioned before, our demographics were 18 to 30-year-old females. Now it's 30 to 45-year-olds. So what are they doing in that particular time of day? Are we changing content based on top of funnel versus lower funnel at times of high versus low traffics? So, what's the content strategy? Is it going to change? And what's going to shift in the next 6 months? So for us, we know that consumers are still doing a lot of research on their desktop before purchasing higher end products. So then segmenting high end products into low end products and then looping that into time of day. So it's rapidly changing, but keeping up and showing people what they need and want is the most important there for sure.
It's interesting, Jess, we've sort of talked about the opportunity and the value that a mobile user can bring. We haven't really spoken about risks, so risks that brands are slow to adopt this strategy. Can you maybe, particularly from a partner perspective, kind of articulate your point of view around what the risk is for a brand to be slow to adopt this sort of strategy?
Yeah, so I'd say probably not enough of our partners at the moment are currently offering app to app. So there's a few issues. If a customer is already using both of our apps, it can mean that they aren't entitled to rewards, which is kind of crazy because you're not rewarding your most loyal customers. I get there's tech involved. We'll probably talk to Dean about that. But essentially it can interfere with a smooth customer experience. So on one side of things, I've literally had to create deep links to avoid customers going to the app because it can redirect you directly, which is not ideal. And then we've also run some really awesome campaigns with app-only offers that have been received really well from our customers. So a recent one we did a push out for a alcohol delivery partner to Victoria customers with their app as they went into lockdown again, and it increased week-on-week sales by 88%. So I think it's definitely worth, exploring your setup to enable app to app so that the customer can transact more seamlessly and just have a better experience for sure.
Wow, that's a really great example in terms of, such a targeted user base and, so hopefully solving a need at that moment that users had, I imagine.
Major need.
I think, Dean, that's sort of like one of the areas I want to talk about, which is like the creative uses for mobile. So, and again, you get some good insights across the portfolio of clients you have at Branch. So have there been any innovative ways that you've observed that, brands are engaging users and driving engagement through mobile apps?
Yeah, definitely. There's so many. I think Jess had just a great example of app to app, but one of my favorite that I've sort of seen personally over the last 12 months is the resurgence of the QR code. I think everyone probably thought that was, dead in the water. But, they're back, and they're not just back for checking in places. They're actually back, and smart brands are really leveraging QR codes to tie their sort of offline activity to their online activity and, drive those seamless user experiences. What Jess was just touching on, our expectations, our user expectations are set by the best mobile leaders in the world, the Ubers, the Amazons. It's not set by a particular channel, and if you don't meet that, the user will leave and you get bad performance. So yeah, QR codes have been an awesome one. I've seen some great ones for QSR where they sort of have them outdoor, and I can be at the bus shelter, and like some of the leading QSR brands in Australia. Another great one I loved, which is Iconic, one of the leading online retailers in Australia. If you get their little booklet, whenever you order anything, they'll send you out their latest catalog, which, changes. I don't know how regular it changes. I'd assume at least monthly, and each page has a curated sort of set of products. And if you scan that QR code, it actually deep links you directly into the app with those products in the page, right into a relevant product page within the app. So there's tons of ways that brands are using QR codes to sort of tie that offline to online activity. And I think that's amazing, not just from the user experience, but also the measurement. It's realistically the first way that we've been able to tie, outdoor activity and above the line activity, whether it's, everyone's probably observed this QR codes in ads now on the telly. You can now measure the performance that you get from your users via a QR code. So that's definitely one of my personal favorites that I've seen over the last 12 months.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that maybe QR codes are the Stephen Bradbury of technology in the 21st century. I feel like they launched and maybe they had some interesting use cases, but they kind of faded. But, with our health response in Australia, they've certainly made a strong comeback, and now there's been great use cases for engaging with brands. Angus, you guys do in-store QR codes, is that right?
Something we're looking into. So from us, Dean's touched on a couple of good examples there. We've used QR codes in offline media before. Like I think we painted a big mural where there was a QR code and someone could, go into the draw to win a prize. We actually use QR codes on our website to drive people to the app as like a form of download. So it's from an in-store strategy. There's a lot of things going on from a digital cards perspective. But if you went on our website today, you could see either enter your mobile phone number, or you can simply scan a QR code. It then shoots you through to one of the app stores to download. So there's definitely been a resurgence of it, and we can probably, one positive out of COVID is the resurgence of QR codes. So hats off to them. But I think it's having that connection is key. So where, there's a big focus of us for online to offline and vice versa, and actually showing incrementality. So for a brand, if you can show incrementality, there's a reason to go to them and have a chat. It's a no-brainer. But if you go to a retailer or a brand with a problem without presenting a solution first, if it's a digital card or if it's a QR code, then, forget about it. But it's back to the point of like the smartphone penetration in Australia. We've got a high level of penetration on smartphones because people are on them all the time. But it's having that device to, that event to close the loop is key. So whether someone's on a desktop at home browsing or in a store, if there's a link to pinpoint them back to a specific merchant to prove incrementality, that's key from our perspective.
Jess, Angus just mentioned incrementality is, what's your approach with this in terms of Raise, and have you guys used the QR codes or geo-targeting to drive traffic in store?
So QR codes we haven't explored too much yet, but yeah, you just reminded me as we were kind of discussing QR codes. I actually saw on a boxing match recently. I wasn't watching the boxing match. A clip came up on Instagram, but the boxer, I guess he's called, had like a QR code on his uniform, which is crazy. And I guess, you could just pause it and scan it, or like it came up on social media. So I think QR codes have definitely allowed incrementality to kind of be measured offline onto online, which hasn't really been able to be measured before. Like we often get asked and have, sponsored brands, sports brands before, and it's more around brand awareness. So something like that has really kind of allowed, a form of measurement, which is really cool. But onto Raise, sorry, I just thought of that and wanted to share it. But onto Raise. Onto Raise, so we have explored in-store as well. And yeah, the number one thing when you sort of bring it up with brands is, how is it incremental? How do I know that the customer wasn't just going to shop there anyway? So we actually did build out an activation button. So the customer does need to click to activate the in-store offer and then make a purchase on their linked card. And it's pretty cool. You can set up any sort of terms, whether it's specific stores only or add a minimum order value. But something else fun that we've also been able to do is push out notifications to customers with the transactional data, but also geo. So there was a female fashion store that recently refurbished their Bondi store, so we could then push out a notification to people in those postcodes and let them know, check it out. Plus, you get a little reward back into your account, which is really cool. So it's exciting that more brands and more publishers are getting to the offline space.
Yeah, it's amazing. You just gave a really good example about how you I guess, working collaboratively with your brands on that mobile strategy. There are, listing today, there would be advertisers and brands, but there would also be partners, of course. So is there any advice or, framework that you can kind of discuss for partners to consider about how they improve their app focus with the brands?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I don't think it should be a reason to not work together if you don't have an app, because as we've discussed today, customers are multi-channel. But I think it's important to get an understanding of what the brand's goals are and how you as the publisher can help them achieve those goals. And, if you do have an app like us, you could almost serve as a communication channel to app users of a non-app brand. So whether it's through particular messaging or custom audiences, exclusive offers, whatever it may be. So usually one thing when I do discuss with brands about optimizing and strategizing is figure out who their target market is and how we're going to help them get in front of those customers specifically. So in a nutshell, what I'm trying to say is you just need to have open communication between both parties and just understand what they're trying to get out of it and how we can add value, really.
Yeah, amazing. Angus, can brands work with Klarna if they don't have an app?
I love a good segue, Will. You know me. Yes, they certainly can. And our app obviously allows that. So I think to start with, Jess has absolutely nailed the advice, and no doubt Dean's going to follow up with some very similar advice there. So from our perspective, don't just not work with the brand. For us at Klarna, we want to give consumers as much choice as possible. And if you're giving them a reason to leave your environment, or you're sending them a push notification that makes them uninstall the app, then you've lost your KPI. So for us, being new in market as well, it's looking what key partners are doing. This isn't necessarily directed at Jess or not, but follow suit to kind of catch up and get yourself as a brand to a position where you shift from being reactive as a partner to being proactive. And then, the grass is greener on the other side for sure. And look at the iterations you're doing and continuously adapt, especially for us with our, core demographics kind of constantly changing, being at the front of mind. So as you segued into, Will, we're in a good spot because we don't need brands to be integrated. A brand can be in our consumer shopping app because a user can click through and generate a one-time card and still purchase. So to a brand, it comes through as a regular Visa transaction, but to our users, they can actually then pay that in full. So that's around that incrementality piece for us as a partner, is giving users the ability to pay on for with brands that don't necessarily have it integrated.
Amazing. Dean, we've just heard obviously about the opportunity and brands and partners and geofencing and QR codes and all the amazing things. It can be quite overwhelming for some brands who are maybe considering investing more in the mobile space. Are there some tips or some suggestions that you would give those brands that are listening about how to start and what kind of framework to approach in terms of investing, practical ways to improve their mobile strategy?
Yeah, for sure. There's many. I'll try and narrow down a few, which I think act as a starting point. I think firstly, on a brand perspective and the use of mobile and apps, this is not going anywhere. This is the future. So although maybe in Australia we have large web audiences, we're a little bit behind other markets, other Western markets, definitely digital first or mobile first markets like Asia, it's just going to be an emerging trend. So as a brand, you can't ignore this fact, and you have to maybe start, like Angus said, catching up or thinking, what can you be doing to accelerate your digital transformation in the mobile space? And for me, some of the things you should be doing is, if you have an app already, understand what value does this bring to the user, and really importantly, understand what is the value of your app user compared to, say, a web user, like a mobile web user or a desktop user. This will give you some really great insights into, the business value that the app and mobile presents to you as a business. It's not going to be relatable to every brand, but if you do have one, if you do have an app, I definitely think it's something important to understand. And then secondly, once you know that, you have to start thinking, putting a plan together for your digital transformation. So what sort of technology do I need to bring myself up to, I guess, up to scope with your peers in the industry, and not just catch up, but move forward. So I guess with brands like Klarna and Raise, they're ahead of the game. They're mobile first technology. They're doing great things in this space. They're leading the space. But if you're a brand trying to catch up to these or enter this space, or you're a traditional brand, what can you be doing? And part of that is just reviewing things like what does your tech stack look like, and not just your current tech stack, but what does the tech stack of the future look like? So if we look at a partnership and affiliate perspective, Partnerize is a great example of this. The affiliate space going back 5-7 years ago was very different to what it is now, and this is because of a technology like Partnerize and everything that it offers to anyone who wants to leverage this channel. There's so many great channels out there, but I would say, understand the value of your different users, what that brings, what business opportunities that presents, and then review your tech stack and really get an understanding of what different technology can help drive that digital transformation as you in a brand, so that you're not Kodak, you're not getting left in the wind and no one remembers who you are if you're under maybe 20 or 25 on this, watching this webinar and understanding who Kodak is. They used to make cameras and film. Yeah, that'd be some really top level advice I would suggest.
Okay, so be a Stephen Bradbury and not a Kodak. That is very good advice from this webinar, I feel. Angus and Jess, Dean just pointed to both of you guys as leaders in this space. I'm going to ask you both a question without notice, which is, is there anything you can share with us in terms of exciting things coming for Klarna and Raise in the second half of 2021 or beyond that you might be able to share with us on today's session?
After you, Jess.
We've kind of already launched this, but we recently just launched home loans, and that's going to be a focus sort of into the rest of the year. So I think where Raise sort of started was, these small little roundups, like everything kind of adds up, and we're kind of now adapting as our customers grow, which we've spoken about today. So we recently launched Raise Home Ownership, so our customers can get a home loan with us, which is really cool because I think they're saving the money with small amounts. They've then built it up. We have the ability to set a savings goal, and one common one would be mortgage, first home, amongst other things like first car, that sort of thing. So we were like, how can we then help them on that next step of their journey? So it has just launched, but we'll definitely sort of focus on that as time sort of goes on. And you do get a $300 raised reward and $12.50 every month, plus we plant trees. So it's just a great experience, which has been really cool. And yeah, I think that really sort of what we've kind of discussed today. We've listened to our customers, but also we've introduced this to them and sort of then help guide them and lead them the way as they sort of continue on their finance journey. So that's probably the biggest focus. We've always got things in the pipeline. I don't know if I can share anything that hasn't already launched yet. So you'll just have to stay tuned for everything else.
I will stay tuned. That's amazing, and a great example of evolving with your customer base as their needs, grow and evolve. And if they trust the brand and they can leverage it further, it's amazing.
Yeah, exactly.
Your message and your vision about financial independence and is just amazing. So that's awesome. Angus, any Klarna insights? Sorry.
Yeah. Oh, Will, I was just going to say, I think that's an awesome example from Jessica and Raise of, this is where apps are where like great users are. And, a brand like Raise started out in investment. They're now looking to offer home loans. It's a great example of this is what I was sort of banging on about. And, this is the future. We're seeing neobanks and fintech and all these things explode because, no one wants to go into the bank and waste their time. If I have this great system on my phone right in front of me and I can get that personalization and that experience on the phone without having to go into a physical store. Nothing wrong with physical stores. I'm not saying sit on your phone all day, but I'm just saying it offers up more opportunities, and it just really reiterates the value of like your audiences and listening to them and giving them that option at least within the app on the phone.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Yeah, well done. I guess any Klarna insights you can share?
Yeah, we're actually also launching home loans. No, we're not. Off the cusp, and now I've had a few minutes to think about it. We recently acquired and thanks Jess and Dean for the pausing there. Holding up. We recently acquired a company called Top Looks, and it's now called Klarna Dynamic Ads, which is available. Shameless plug coming up here, which is available for our integrated merchants, or also just general brands that want to, build a better ROAS and get better results from a merchandise value perspective, and obviously return on ad spend there in the wider display world. So Dynamic Ads is basically a tool that sits in the middle of a product feed and any tech or digital media avenue or technology that can accept a product feed. And it basically sits in the middle, and it follows over 100,000 different influencers. It's got 20 million different items in its catalogs. It can basically take all the information from a product feed and take an image, whether it's by itself, or we can also cut images out against models and have kind of overlay different images. And then we pump, say Facebook from a DPA perspective, we can put 1,000 different images into Facebook, and there's no real integration needed apart from giving us the endpoints at your feed. So Facebook can then, instead of having one image in a DPA carousel, it can continuously test and learn and then iterate based on its own algorithm. So, they refresh every 30 minutes, and it just allows brands to have, as it's quite up to date and timely, anything that's in stock can be showing, because from a consumer perspective, there's nothing worse than clicking on an ad and going through to an out of stock page. I can tell you, as a frequent shopper, is very frustrating. So that's something that's we've started to roll out across a couple of clients, and there's a couple of big ones globally. That's kind of the next big play from us.
Yeah, amazing. That sounds great. Good evolution. Well, I've certainly learned a lot today. This has been a really interesting discussion, talking about the, ability and the opportunity for brands to leverage mobile apps more effectively. So Angus and Dean and Jess, thank you very much for your time and your expertise, sharing your insights. And I think everyone would have benefited from the session today. So everyone watching, thank you again for watching. Stay tuned for more great sessions coming up.